Welcome back to the Monarch brand. I am the founder and CEO of the Monarch brand, Daniel. I am also your host. I am here with another special guest. I'm here with the founder and CEO of That Payroll Guy, and also the director of payroll operations at CBiz. I'm here with also a good friend, fellow Hokie, Gerard Hall. How are you feeling today, bro?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
Man, I am very glad to be here. Super excited we can make this happen. Also,
Absolutely.
I have to say, I introed you as the director of payroll operations, which is a relatively new title. So, congrats are in order. Congrats on the promotion.
I appreciate that.
So this past week was your first week, right?
That's correct.
How's it been?
Uh, well, transition, is always tough because it's not like I got to just jump into the director role and not like already still do the stuff I was doing beforehand. So we're kind of in between since my director is transitioning out. So I partly still have my team while taking on the new responsibility. So it's been interesting to say the least.
So gotcha. Um, so I take it this is probably not a good time to ask you let me hold some.
Nah. It,
Just
I mean,
20, just 20.
but at least you're consistent. I will say that anytime any people in our group they get elevated or they run into a promotion or what have you, you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna send a cash app request. A
What's
request?
those things that
Huh? What?
they do in other countries where like everyone contributes to the pot and then somebody they eat good and then it's somebody else's
Are
turn.
you talking about a susu?
Yes, that is what I'm trying to cultivate. Except for it's always my turn.
Ah,
So
gotcha. I don't think that's how
so
that works though.
I know, but just let me borrow $20, dog. I get it back to you. I'm gonna give it back to you tomorrow, bro. It's no big deal.
Just wait till tomorrow.
Okay. All right, man. Let's get into it. Like I said, I'm very excited. One because I just know you, but also I know how you operate, and I think that this will be a very good practical episode. I really respect how you approach things. Like you inject your personality into things, but you also approach things from a logical standpoint.
Most
And
definitely.
so I'm really excited to really get into your story, but also for us to tell it in a way that can help others,
Yeah,
especially those that are trying to get into payroll and or consulting and or just entrepreneurship in general.
absolutely.
Cool. So first question. Can you just give a broad overview of what payroll entails? Because on the outside, we know paychecks, W-2s. We know what when we need ours, right?
Right.
But what else is it to the industry that people outside of it don't see, and that we maybe take for granted?
Sure, absolutely. So you mentioned, most people know payroll as I get paid every other week and I get a W 2 at the end of the year and my pay better be right and all of that good things. But there's so much more into payroll, and the things that I think that people don't see that don't do payroll is there's a lot of reconciliation. Like nobody, of course, wants to have an incorrect paycheck. So there's a lot involved in making sure not just pressing a button and saying, all right, pay Danny his $20. So it's a little more than that. But a lot of our industry, as of especially with COVID and the pandemic taking place, is legal. All 50 states do things very differently, from when you can pay somebody, how often you have to pay somebody, how overtime is paid out. Certain states have different regulations from the federal regulations. And so a good portion of just making sure payroll is done correctly is making sure that, hey, let me make sure Danny, he's in this state. Let me make sure that we're honoring and going complying with that state. And so outside of just the processing of payroll and balancing and getting people paid, it's making sure that we are legally compliant, because there's a lot of hefty fees when you are not.
Hmm. So a lot on the line for you guys that probably goes like unappreciated then.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Payroll is so underappreciated because, nobody calls and says, "You know what? My paycheck was right every time this year. Thank you so much." The only time we get a call is when their payroll is not right. And they're like, "Okay, I need this fixed right away." So, like you said, we're the Cinderella of HR. It's just like, yeah, you just do what you do over here and make sure it gets done right. But I love it.
I can tell, and I love that you love it. So, with that said, how did you get into it?
So I started back at the age of 17, 18, at my church. And so I did the payroll for the summer camp payroll at our church. And it really intrigued me because I'm a numbers person. I love math. And so I got, to play with numbers, but I got to get the inside scoop. Like I got to know how much people were making and all of these things. And so that really intrigued me. And so I started at the church, went off to college. Shout out again to Virginia Tech. And then when I worked at Virginia Tech, worked at the hotel on campus. And as part of being a supervisor, we had to do some minor payroll things. So I still got a little dabble into what I had already experienced back at the church. And then after I graduated, I wanted to get an HR because that's what my degree is in HR management. And so I applied. And then the company I work for today, CBiz, reached out and said, hey, we've got a benefits rep position to process FSA claims. And I'm like, I guess that's a start. So that in 2008, started working at CBiz in the benefits department, and then in 2010 transitioned over to payroll services, and I've been in payroll ever since. So when I tell people that I've been in this industry 20 years, it's crazy to think that somebody our age is able to have done something consistently for 20 years. So, but I love it. I mean, I'm all things payroll. And back to my business, that payroll guy, like everything, even with our conversations in the chat, it's just like anytime something about payroll comes, it's like, hey, can you confirm this? Like, I'm hearing this. What's going on here? Because this is my life, and I love it. I love what I do.
Love it. What made you so passionate about payroll then? I mean, was it, I know you said you're a numbers guy, but was there like a human element that contributed to that?
Absolutely. So I'm a fact finder, and as I was stating, when it comes to payroll, a lot more than just paying people is compliance. And for me, it's making sure that stuff is accurate, making sure that I'm not just reading somebody's blog that they put up with misinformation. And so the thing that keeps me going in the payroll world, because like I said, even though I say it's underappreciated, I do enjoy the fact of researching the different states, when the states change policies, when COVID happened and the IRS and the federal government and Congress came up with all these different credits to help incentivize employers. That touched payroll. And so, I'm that person that I read all 862 pages of the Congress, and it's just like, okay, it kind of reads like the Bible, thee, thou. I'm just like, look, I just want like Cliff's notes, but I'm that person that actually sat there and read the whole policy because I wanted to know for myself. I know Forbes does a great job, and all these other different articles do a great job of summarizing. But for me, because I'm such that fact finder, I get joy out of it. So yes, that the human element for me in payroll is the fact finding.
Hmm. That's a valuable skill because people do not like to read.
They do not.
And so, yeah, that's definitely a talent. Um, so, how were you able to advance in the field? To go from what you did to director. Like just for yourself, but also say someone's here and they like, I like numbers too. You know what I mean? So,
Sure. So like I said, I started. I moved over into payroll services in 2010. Um, I've also, as you know, have the gift of gab, and so with the gift of gab, on top of being that fact finder, I found that I train very well, and so I started training internally at my organization, some of our internal courses, how to do certain things in the system and things of that nature. In 2012, I joined the local APA chapter here in Roanoke, and just to attend and get my credits for my certification. And they were like, "Hey, we need a speaker," and I heard you're a good speaker. I'm like, "Okay," so I started speaking at the local chapter. Then in 2015, I joined the Virginia statewide, and started speaking at the Virginia statewide chapter. And then in 2018, I joined the APA, the American Payroll Association, and actually, for a short stint, joined their National Speakers Bureau, which is about maybe 110 people that are selected by the APA to actually speak on the behalf of the APA. And so just that knowledge and doing the fact finding and being able to speak to it and train other people is really what kind of helped propel my industry. I mean, it propelled me in the industry. In addition, LinkedIn was huge for me, which is how I really got my business started because I realized, while in my mind, you know, everybody, in my mind, everybody in payroll knows everything about payroll. And so there were questions being asked in the group that I was in on LinkedIn, and I started answering questions, and people were like, "Oh my God, that's exactly what I need." And I'm just like, in my mind, I'm thinking, I thought everybody in payroll knew that. But then I started to realize the information and knowledge that I had wasn't something that everybody knew in payroll, regardless of how long they've been in. And so that's kind of really how I got my start on the consulting and business side. But it was weird, going from like people actually paying me to do the research. It's like, all I did was just read the IRS publications, and you're going to pay me to answer that question. Still a little surreal to me, but that's really how I got my start. Is just being knowledgeable and being that and dedicating myself to being an expert in the field.
So you mentioned LinkedIn help you out a lot. Are there any other sort of, because I'm not a good LinkedIn person,
Okay.
like at all. So for the other me's out there, are there any other good strategies that you really employ to network on LinkedIn or to get involved or make your presence felt?
Yes. So the long, oh, no, I want to say a long time ago, but LinkedIn used to have a separate app called Groups, and they still have groups on LinkedIn. But it was very helpful because in the two groups that I was specifically talking about, people were the main point of that group was to ask questions related to payroll, and so by me answering a lot of questions, that ended up people coming to my inbox. Hey, you answer like 5 questions, and I can definitely tell you're smart and you know your stuff. So I have this situation at work. Can you help me with this? Can you provide me a spreadsheet? Am I calculating this correctly? Is this the right law? And so that's what really kind of gained the notoriety, is just by answering the questions. And so LinkedIn started seeing that I was getting a lot of connections. Like they're like, you're averaging, at that time, averaging 15, 20 new connections a week. So it's just like, okay, so we're going to change your profile to a content creator. And so I've got different buttons and things of that nature on LinkedIn. And then I realized, okay, I need to start being more of a trusted voice. So rather than just answering questions in a group, let me use my platform and actually put things out there. Hey, West Virginia just lowered their wage base. You need to know this because they're retroing it back to January 1st. Things of that nature, because people are like, it's weird. Like there was a somebody, I had posted something about the W-2. The W-2 was supposed to be redesigned next year, and ended up not being. And so I put that out there, and somebody put in the comment and said, "This is why I follow you. You are the goat of payroll." And I was just like, "Yo, like that." It's still crazy to me, even though I have a business and I do this for a living. It's still wild to me that people, and that's why I also have to be careful, because it's like, all right, I need to make sure I'm 100%, 150% right before I put something out there, because there are people who will literally say, Gerard put this on LinkedIn. It's got to be true. I'm going to hold on to this. So, but yeah, just really, just real recognizing my talent, within LinkedIn, and just building up to where it was more than just me posting my online resume. Because that's what a lot of people use LinkedIn for, is just to post an online resume. But there's so much more into that. I've networked with so many people. I've connected with people. I even had a job offer last year from a big four company just because of my LinkedIn presence. And it was paying really good money, but they also asked me to shut my business down. And I was like, can't shut down my business. So I appreciate the offer. You do realize you found me because of my business, but you want me to shut down the business. The money that you're paying, while that's a nice number, it, I can't do it. So yeah.
I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit.
Okay.
But from what I get so far, you found something you love and you wanted to equip yourself with it, and so you're a curious person, and so you basically equip yourself with the knowledge to help others, and you saw the need to make this a thing that could benefit you as a would-be business owner. Like obviously you're a business owner now, but at the
Right.
time you know you weren't. But also benefit those in the payroll industry or just needed help, like an individual that just needed help.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you feel like this is just me being a curious person myself? Do you feel like you were lucky in the sense that you found this thing that you love? Because it started with summer camp, and then you had a little taste of it, and then it became like your lifeblood. You know, do you feel lucky for that, or was it just like, was it like divine intervention? How do you feel about that? Do you ever reflect on that?
I think it's a mix of two. I do feel lucky that my name is a trusted voice in the industry nationwide. Like there are people who know me and I don't even know them, but they know me as, hey, that's the guy that knows payroll. And it's just like, that's still wild in my mind. But not to get too deep, but back when I was a kid, I had so many people like prophesying and saying things over my life like there's something different about you and that you have influence and you need to be careful with your influence because if you use it negatively, people are going to follow you negatively, but then you have a bad name. So just make sure you use influence. And so I feel that's why I feel it's a mix. So I think there is some divine intervention there because that was called out when I was a kid, when I had no idea what I wanted to do growing up. And just the fact that, it seemed like anything that I touched based off of the things that were prophesied to me was going to turn into magic. And so half luck, half divine intervention.
Sure. I could see that too. Because, I mean, obviously, like, to be super clear, and I think you know this, but just to be clear, like, obviously, you have the talent, you have the capability, but there's also talented people that just remain kind of unsure about what they want to do. So I was just curious about, like, landing specifically on payroll. But I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So you're at this point where you're building your presence on LinkedIn and you see this need. As practically as you would like to explain it, how did you go about setting up the business itself?
So the business really came purely from LinkedIn. I've used no ad revenue, I've used no marketing or anything because I had already created a solid following. And it just got to the point where I was answering a lot of messages related to certain situations. And then people I look up to in the industry, both in payroll and just outside of payroll, just entrepreneurs. I have a lot of, I want to say a lot of friends, but I have some mentors that are just in the entrepreneurial space. They're not in the payroll space, but it's just like, hey, and so they were just like, Gerard, you're at a place where you need to be compensated for what you're doing. And in my mind, and I think that's what happened. And it was hard because I was looking at, oh, I just want to help people. I love what I do. It's like, yeah, that most people who are in business love what they do, but then they get paid for it. And so it. And even though I've had an entrepreneurial mindset, like back, I was the person who sold Kool-Aid pops in the summer, so I've always had the business mindset. My mom had a side business growing up, helping people get scholarships and things. So I've grown up around that. But just making that initial jump of wow, like I'm really getting ready to tell people, hey, no more inbox. Go to my site and actually book a session to have your question answered. But so to answer, so as far as what I went through to get the business built, is literally just trying to find a name. And I said I'm not going to use my name because people get it wrong every single day. I'm Gerald, Jason, Jared, everything but Gerard. So I was just like, all right, I got to figure something that's going to be catchy and that could still be trademarked. And so I looked, did some research. I'm like, that payroll guy sticks because the payroll guy was kind of already taken. It's not trademarked, but I'm just like, that's kind of basic. So I use that because it's just like that has a little more oomph to it. Like that payroll guy. Like this is the one you want to work with. And so that's really kind of how I built the business. Like, I wish I had a better story of how I've done all this research and did these analytics. I just literally said, okay, I've already got something that I'm giving away for free. I'm just now going to monetize it.
Sure. Now, numerically, how did you? I know you're a numbers guy. How did you go about like calculating the price points for your services? And I ask because, so I'm on the product side, right?
Right.
And so when it came time for me to, I have all these raw ingredients, and then I make them into one solid product, and I buy these labels, and I have to ship it, so on and so forth. Me personally, I just kept Googling, like price calculator, so on and so forth, until I found one with an interface that I really like.
Okay.
But it's different on the consulting side,
Mm-hmm.
and on the speaking side as well, because, you know, I've seen people go from $100 an hour to like $500 an hour, so, um, you know, how did that work for you?
So I looked at my target audience, and to your point, it was tough trying to find that sweet spot. And so I do have different tiers of pricing depending on what I am doing, between speaking engagements and then just straight out consulting. And if I'm consulting with a person versus consulting with a business. Um, so after taking in my expenses, because there are expenses, of course, that go with consulting, I've got a website that I've got to maintain and all of these. So I'm trying to configure and figure out what's a good sweet spot, to because you don't want to make it too cheap because then people will be like, oh well, he must not be all that good because he's only charging $20. Like, no. But at the same time, I can't jump out here and be like, yeah, I know I'm that payroll guy. It's gonna be $500 for a consultant hour. They'll be like, are you crazy? So I had to find that sweet spot. And so what I really did is just kind of looked at, and I've always had a rate, regardless of before I even got into business, of what like what my rate is an hour. And what I mean by that is this. So let's say I said my rate is $40 an hour. Like that, like that's how I make my decisions on purchasing or paying somebody to do it versus me doing it. So let's say, my rate is $40 an hour. If I make the decision whether to mow my lawn myself or to pay somebody to mow my lawn, I take into consideration, okay, it's probably going to take them 45 minutes to mow the lawn, because they've got the expensive and heavy equipment. And it's going to take me probably an hour and a half because I got a push mower. So it's my mind. It's like, okay, well, if they're going to only charge me $60, I'm going to pay the $60 because I could be doing something else with my time. And so I kind of just took that same model that I used in my personal life and kind of converted it to my business and said, okay, what does an hour of consulting look like for me, knowing that I am providing quality content and answers for them, but at the same time, not making it impossible, to um, obtain and continue to have clients. So I didn't do, I didn't have any fancy calculators or anything. It's just purely just trying to find that focal point. And like I said, it ended up coming up with different tiers based off of who I'm working with. Am I doing a speaking engagement? Because that's a little different. I do charge a lot more for speaking engagements because that's presentation, that's building content, and having documentation and deliverables after the session versus, a 30-minute session with a person about their paycheck or a 30-minute session with a business trying to make a decision about changing their policy.
So you went from kind of answering questions on LinkedIn to now charging for a defined but a service that you were previously offering for free. Was that challenging?
Yes, and it's still challenging, because I still get people that I used to help, and when I look at the inbox history, I can see 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where I was just answering willy nilly, just answering for free, just trying to help out, and then in their mind they're like, okay, well, I know he's been that payroll guy. And again, I created that payroll guy before it was a business. So I wanted to have something out there that kind of had a snazzy name that it ended up converting to a business. So it is challenging because you find that people love you when you're giving them something for free. And then when you decide to do that same thing but then charge, all of a sudden they have a different tone. Like they'll start off in the preface, "Oh, you are so amazing and I'm reaching out to you because you're so awesome and I really hope you can help me. I really love what you do. I follow you all the time. I've got this scenario and I need to work it out." And then when you have to respond with, "Hey, Lisa, thank you for the compliments. I appreciate that. This would be best to be set up as a 30-minute or a 60-minute consult. Here's the link here." And you either get crickets or you get the, "Oh, well, I mean, you used to help me. I don't understand. I guess you've gotten too good to help people." And I'm like, you would think that a person who has been getting free information to help move them forward, whether in their company or their personal business, would be like, okay, because like again, I'm not out here charging $500 an hour. My prices are reasonable, but at the same time, my time is valuable. And of course, and the weird thing about consulting is when you start paying for it and people get upset, they're like, "Well, I can just look up the answer." Well, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. You can go look up the answer, but you've reached out to me, which means that I need to go get you the answer and give you the documentation. And that is going to be a service that I'm going to charge for. So yes, very difficult. It's not as bad anymore because people realize I've got my website out. So they know, hey, this ain't free game anymore. But it is still challenging, especially those that you have helped out in the past when I was doing it for free.
Sure. What are some issues like I imagine for like individuals, like you kind of referenced earlier, maybe something they have a question about something on their paycheck or something like that. What are some examples of issues you kind of help corporations out with, like bigger businesses and things of that?
Yeah, so corporations usually are instilling policies related to pay benefits. So, like, I had one corporation who was looking at moving to unlimited PTO, and trying to help them work through that. There was a couple organizations that were looking to um, move abroad, and what did that look like? What kind of systems would they need? And then, of course, I got quite a bit of business around the pandemic because they needed to determine, okay, how do I treat this remote worker? Like they used to come into an office, now their office is at their house. And so what does that look like? And helping them instill policies. Another one that I've helped with is changing their pay frequency. Hey, we want to change from biweekly to semi-monthly. These are the states that we're in. Can we do this? Because some states won't allow you to based off of the work. So just most of the time when it comes to corporations, it's regarding a change that they're looking to implement and looking for guidance to ensure that the policy is right. I've also helped corporations with some employee relations, like they overpaid somebody or somebody got a sign on bonus. And now they need to repay it back because they didn't work through their whole period. What does that look like from a taxation perspective? How do I get them a corrected form? What do I need to tell them? What does the verbiage need to say? So just a couple examples of how I have helped businesses and corporations in relation to payroll.
Although everyone has payroll, like your services and the way you offer them are relatively niche. So outside of LinkedIn, what are the most effective ways you found to reach your target audience, and how did you figure that out?
So I've decided to create additional social media. So LinkedIn is more so for my payroll professionals, but I'm now looking and have started the conversion of becoming educated in the employee space. So I do have, like I said, I have employees or people asking about their personal paycheck, but I really want to get more exposure to being the name for not just payroll professionals. Like payroll professionals, they know me. Whenever I go to a payroll conference, things like, oh, you've helped me so much, boom, boom, boom. But I want to be that trusted voice and that trusted name when it comes to payroll. Because if you think about it, Most people, like we opened up in this podcast, don't really know much about their paycheck. They know how much they get paid an hour or what their salary is. They know that there's these numbers that get deducted out of that big gross pay amount, and then they're left with the net pay amount and have no idea how that all really happens. They just know, okay, this is what I'm left at, this is what I get paid for. And so I've opened up more socials like Instagram and TikTok to kind of work on the employee side and converting and getting education on things in my mind are, oh, everybody in payroll knows this, but people who are employees, they don't know it. So that's what I've done to kind of open my exposure up to convert and make more, monetize more on the employee side, because I've done very well on the employer side, the business side, but just working to get that the employee educated. Because what I learned when I actually, because before I was the trainer for a short stint for my company for 2 years, and what I learned when I went to training conferences is that adults learn kind of like kids, and the more you can educate them ahead of time, the less questions. And so that's the frustration part that a lot of frustrating part that a lot of people in my industry be like, oh, this person keeps coming to me and asking these questions. Is like, well, have you educated them? Have you put something out there? Because if you don't put something out there, they're going to keep asking you questions. But if you put something out there and say, hey, when you fill out the W-4 this way, and this is why your taxes look like this is why. So just trying to convert more into the employee space.
You kind of raised a good point, whether you meant to or not. Maybe not point, but you sparked a question in me. So, from your first paid consulting booking to now, and then from your first paid speaking engagement to now, how have you refined those services?
I have refined my services by adding my personality. Um, I have always thought, okay, I am business. I need to be a little more staunch and professional and cookie cutter, and nobody wants to hear. And it's just like, Gerard, the reason people love you and the reason they get with your name is because of your personality. Even though if they may not have ever seen a video, but the way I type is the way I talk, and so there's sarcasm that comes with it. There's some foolishness and some craziness that goes with it, and so as far as refining, I put my personality back into my business, because I was so accustomed to, okay, I'm about to go train 200 people on this subject. They may not like my personality, so but it's just like, no, then you're not being yourself. I wasn't being authentic. And so by refining myself, I still educate them, give them what they need, but the same flavor where you and I would hang out and chill and have a conversation is the same way that I present now, is bringing in my personality. So um, refining, it was, I consider it refining because I'm literally comfortable now to say, okay, Gerard, you can be yourself. This is why people have come to you. This is why you have created the name. This is why you have the following that you have. Just make sure that you're genuine and open and honest to yourself in your education, from consults to speaking engagements and everything in between.
Would you say that it's an accurate assessment to say there was probably some fear in overcoming that?
Yes, absolutely, there was fear because you know, as a consultant, you're work like I said, you're working with. I could be working with a business one day. I could be working with an employee the very next session, and it's difficult um, because when I work with an employee, and then of course it depends on if I know them. Like, oh, that's Danny. I can do whatever. But then it's like this person who found me on my website. I've never talked to them before. They might be like, okay, is this dude really serious? Like, I thought I was getting educated by a trusted voice, and here he is trying to give jokes and be sarcastic. And I have a serious situation going on. And so, yeah, it is difficult, but I will say that I've gotten comfortable because I'm not for everybody. And you learn that, of course, when you're in business. I treat everybody with respect. That's one thing that's always a given. I'm not going to say anything like straight outlandish or politically incorrect, but I am going to be myself. Some people love it. Some people don't care for it, and that's okay. And I am comfortable now in knowing that it's okay to be who I am.
I love that. And that's one reason why I love talking to other business owners, because that's what sets a business apart, right?
Right.
Like there's already enough of that out there, but there's not a you know, there's not a me. Like I remember for myself, and I grew up, you're from this area, so for me it was ingrained in me, like you go to college, you graduate, you get a government job. Like
Right.
this deviation, this business was not something that was ever taught to me. So, and I didn't really have the community of that when I started it. And so I kind of had to figure it out on my own. So I remember the little victories for myself. Like even so when I first started my website and I was like setting up the alias emails, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like the Daniel at the monarchbrand.com and like the support, and I really wanted to, this is like a super small example, of course, but I really wanted to personalize that whole experience to make it me.
Right.
And so I remember like asking people like, hey, what if I just made it like just yo at monarchbrand.com? Like just like yo, like you know what I mean? And at first it got backlash. Like nobody really was rocking with it. It was like you should do support, you should do help, something like that. And then I thought about it. I was like, I mean, it's not gonna stop anyone from like reaching out to me if they want to reach out to me bad enough.
Right.
And I'm paying for the domain.
Right.
And so as you were talking, you reminded me of those small victories that I had where, embedding my own story into the brand, embedding my own story into one of the scents I had, and stuff like that. So it's super dope. I asked that question because I wanted to hear how you overcome that, because that's something that's inevitable to me for most business owners, because a lot of us just haven't seen it done before the way that we do it.
Right. Exactly. And to your point, my mom still wants me to get a government job. Like she has a government job. I'm like, Mom, I'm 15 years into my organization at this point. She's just like, well, the government's just safe. I'm like, I know, but I think we're good here, Mom. I think we're good.
Right. So I'm not gonna be messy with it, but I want to double back to the Big Four offer, but indirectly, because in today's society, there's this big push to like quit your job and or be your own boss. But then for you, you could have quit being your own boss to get this super high paying, relatively secure, not government secure, but relatively secure job.
Right.
So at what point, in your opinion, is it worth betting on yourself and leave your job? And on the flip side of that, at what point is it better to kind of say, okay, the business is not working out, or to maybe accept that offer from the Big Four in theory,
Right.
not necessarily you, but someone else who may get a
Yeah,
similar
I will tell
scenario.
you that was one of the most difficult decisions that I had to make last year, and so it was to a point where, like, what they offered me was going to double my salary, plus, and so, wait, we're not talking like chump change here, and it was difficult because it was that defining moment for me where it's just like, all right, you either this is we're at the crossroads, Gerard. You're either gonna bet on yourself and say, I'm doing this, let's go, and you have to do it, or just say, look, this was a good run. I've had great following. It's not like I would lose my LinkedIn overnight. It would just be that I would not be able to convert and do consulting and speaking engagements. And it was at that point where I had to have a come to Jesus to myself and say, I'm betting on myself. I'm really betting on myself. And so, as far as making that decision of converting to, you've got different opportunities. You've got, hey, I've got this business. I'm going to keep my full time and run the business. The biggest thing that you always want to make sure of is that you are not competing with your employer. And so I'm in the payroll world with my employer, and I also am a payroll consultant. So one of the biggest things I had to make sure of is that I wasn't crossing any lines, because that payroll guy is doing well. but it ain't doing well enough for me to just go full fledged with it. I got three other mouths in this house that have to be fed. And so, for my particular situation, it was, hey, as long as you're not going to process payroll under your company, then we're good. You can speak, you can consult, all things good. Perfect. So, if you are going to do both, especially starting up, you need to make sure that you're not running into any non-compete issues with your employer, because you don't want to be with zero income, because I've seen that happen before. But then you've got to make the decision, and this is where numbers do come into play, because you can say, let's just hypothetically say, oh man, that payroll guy made $150,000 last year, so I'm going to go and start my own business. It's like, okay, revenue it made 150,000. How much of that 150,000 did you have to spend to keep the business moving? Because if I had to spend 80,000 in software and fees and insurance to keep it moving, then I really only made $70,000. And is $70,000 enough to move my to do this full fledged? That's a decision you have to make. The other thing that you have to consider truly in making this decision is the time that's going to be involved. I do both. I work for my employer 40 plus hours a week. I have my business right now, because of keeping my business afloat and getting people the communication and things of that nature. I'm working late nights. And so right now I'm in sacrifice mode. It's like, okay, I'm doing both right now because I know there is an end game and plan. I have a magic number of, this is the number I need to hit before I decide to convert and move out. So you've got to be open to it, because nothing's worse, and you know how it is. Like, somebody opens up a restaurant and the food is banging, and you go during lunch, and then they were like, oh, we had to close up for like 45 minutes, and so we'll be right back. We had to run an errand. Be like, well, I guess I can never eat your food. And it's the same situation here. It's like, I don't want to throw out all these different products and services that I know that I'm not going to be able to maintain unless I'm truly working 80 hours a week, 40 hours at my employer, 40 hours on my business. And so you might have to make that, you know, so I am conservatively growing my business because of my full-time job. Like you said, like we talked about earlier, I just started a new role as director. And so, not that I'm taking anything back, but I'm just very hesitant to move forward. So one of the things that you really need to consider, especially if you are going to balance both in the interim, is just making sure that you pace yourself so that you aren't overextending yourself. I have a family, and my wife knows, okay, yep, that's fine if you're up till 1 o'clock in the morning answering emails, getting stuff done on your website, things of that nature. But this can't be a consistent thing, because then now I got issues at home. And that's one thing you never want to have, regardless of what you do, is you need to make sure home is good. And that's another reason why I ended up not taking that Big Four job, is because it was a consultant role. It was a full-fledged consultant role, which meant I would have to travel about 60 to 70%, which means missing out on dance recitals and seeing my kids grow up and school plays and things of that nature. And that for at my age, I'm getting ready to be 40 soon. But had that offer come at 25, I'd be all about it. So just other factors that you have to consider. But
So, father of two, husband, director. What are some ways that you find balance between all that? Is there balance?
oh, there's definitely balance. I compartmentalize just about everything. So I have a computer that's specific for my That Payroll Guy business, and so I don't intermingle things. And then I've got a work laptop, and then there's balance. So we've got a shared calendar where, okay, don't forget your oldest has an appointment at 6 o'clock. Like, okay, so just being able to do that, because for me, I, no matter how lucrative my business is, no matter how lucrative my employer is paying me, the the whole fact of the matter is, I do it for my family. So if my family feels the grunt of me not being there and being available, then all of this is pointless to me. That's just how I've operated, and that's what's done well for me. But yes, there's definitely balance. I compartmentalize everything. So I know, okay, from 8 to 10 on Tuesday, you're going to work on TPG stuff. This is what you need to knock out. And then after that, because in addition to that, I'm on two different boards. I help do the books of a nonprofit. And so it's more than just what we've talked about today. So there really has, like, I've become the master of balance because my life is too hectic if I don't have my stuff in order.
Sure. I think that for a lot of us, moving forward, it's challenging to come up with those stretch goals, right? You said you have a balance. You have a business that you've grown pretty nicely, but then you're not done, right? And
Right.
so those stretch goals are the ones, for those who aren't familiar with the term, the ones that will push us but not too far, essentially. How do you go about goal setting personally?
So I set goals at the beginning of each year, and then I set goals quarterly. And that's just how I've always done it. I'm not saying it's the best way. It's the way it works for me. Because for me, it's easy. Think about it. New Year's resolution. Yeah, I'm going to go to the gym every day. Well, I'm going to break that by January 17th. I'm just not a gym person. Like, so yeah, my goals have to be realistic. But the reason I set quarterly goals is because that's a shorter period of time. Because, like, if I say, you know what, I want to create six new courses for, paid courses for the year. I set that in January. It's like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. And then here comes, April, and it's just like, oh, you haven't done one yet. Where you said six. So that's why I create quarterly goals, because it's like, all right, let me fixate on these 90 days. These 90 days, this is what I'm going to pump out. This is what I'm going to get done. I am a master procrastinator. I am the person who has an engagement set for 6 months in advance. Like, I know I am going to Texas in September to do a closing keynote session. My brain does not start working on that until like 2 to 3 weeks out. And that's just because of what I have going on. I'm just a person that if I were to open up, because I'm like, all right, I already know what the title is. So I'd open up PowerPoint and I'd have slide one, and 2 weeks later, I would still have slide one. so, so the quarterly goals definitely help with that as well, because it really, I'm that person who's like, all right, this is where I'm at. This is what I need to focus on, because I can get through some things. I procrastinated at tech. It worked out. It didn't work out as well as it did in high school, because, in high school, I didn't like have to study. It made like a 3.7. And Virginia Tech said, nah, you not going to be able to do this same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I learned that the hard way.
I was cheating. I ain't gonna lie, bruh. When procrastination don't work, somebody else did the work. That's all I'm gonna say.
I can.
I'm not proud of some of my hijinks, but I did what I had to do.
You had to do what had to be done.
Had to do it, man. But yeah. So moving forward, what's the biggest challenge with running a business like today?
The biggest challenge is staffing for me. Right now, I'm just doing it as one. Um, I do know I'm at a place where, at the very minimal, I need to get somebody from a content perspective to help push it. The biggest challenge is, because I don't have things that are consistent. I could have a month where I bring in $15,000 for the month. I could also have a month where I bring in $600. So, but I need somebody to help push it along. But I can't say, hey, so we had a $15,000 month last month, so I can pay you, but the $600 month I can't pay you. And so that's, it doesn't gonna work that way. So that is a challenge. I do know how to answer that, and that's creating something that provides recurring revenue so that I can hire somebody. Um, that is one of the toughest thing in business is you see the money, you see what's in the account, and you're just like, if I hire somebody, then that's going to take that money out of the account. Well, that's the reason why the number one the number one expense of most businesses is payroll, because my company would love to make the revenue that they make, but they need us. So it's no different from running your own business. Once you get to a place where you're bringing in income, if you want to move to the next level, you're going to have staff. I am one person. Even if I decided to quit my full time job and do this, I am still only one person, which means that, oh, I can't take vacation or I can't do this because I'm locked down as one person. Yes, my business is called That Payroll Guy, but that doesn't mean that I can't hire somebody to help support and push the business along. So that is my challenge for right now.
Gotcha. What about regret? What's the biggest regret?
Not doing it sooner. Um, when I realized the following I had, the appreciation for what I do, in my mind, I'm just thinking I'm sitting here answering questions. I could have been doing this 10 years ago. Um, and so my biggest regret is just truly not knowing the information, the knowledge that I possessed was actually could be monetized. And so, you know, I know there's all these different stats that say, McDonald's, the Ray Kroc didn't start McDonald's till he was 50. So there's all these, just because you're in your late 30s and your 40s doesn't mean it's not too late. And it's true, but that is my biggest regret, is not recognizing this sooner.
Sure. What about the biggest win?
The biggest win is that I've paid nothing to advertise for my business. I've literally have zero marketing. I've paid for like shirts and things of that nature to market, but as far as, oh, let me boost this ad so that people can see it on my Facebook and let me grow my business, my LinkedIn truly was a blessing for me, in which I already had the following. So all I had to do was just say, okay, here's my business, this is my website, and I had immediate a customer base, because I had already had a following of people who looked to me as their trusted voice in this industry. A good bourbon is the way I celebrate my wins. I not that I need to go to like AA class or anything like that. I don't want anybody being concerned from that. But for me, I am huge on connections. You know how I feel about my friends. Like, I hold my friends close, and so we especially when we can celebrate together. Just feeling the love. So between having the love of my friends and family and a good bourbon is the way I celebrate my wins. I am currently on. Well, you gotta always have Uncle Nearest. Uncle Nearest has to stay in your cabinet just for the culture. And for those who don't know the story, go look it up. It will give you an appreciation for it. So I always have an Uncle Nearest. But lately I've been on some Knob Creek Maple Blend. It's just so smooth, and it's not too mapley, because I don't like flavored drinks. So it's just enough. Basil Hayden is always the staple. Like, hey, I'm just on the porch, just sipping and you know thinking about life. And then you got Buffalo Trace. That's always a win. I'm also excited because I'm supposed to be going to the Louisville Virginia Tech game, football season this year, and so we're going to do the bourbon tour that weekend.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I've been on Ironclad lately,
Okay,
who they distill it in Newport News.
right.
They're pretty good. Um, my boss, one of my bosses put me on to the Basil Hayden Dark Rye. Like, I had tried Basil before, but the Dark Rye is smooth.
Yes, it is.
I actually had Buffalo Trace maybe 3 weeks ago
Okay.
for the first time. That was good. I have when last time I was in DC, I got Barrel, and that's gonna be like my special occasion one. But I'm excited to try it. The guy really hyped it up,
Okay.
so I'm excited to try that.
I'll have to check that one out.
Yes, sir. But heading into the home stretch, what is something that you wish someone would have told you about starting a business before getting to it?
The one thing I wish somebody would have told me, and I'm glad that I learned quickly is that you have friends that say they will support you, and they do mean that, but your friends are not your customers. They can become customers, but the chance of them becoming a customer is very slim, especially in my industry where I'm doing payroll consulting. So it's, there are people who think, okay, well, I got 4,000 friends on my socials, so I'm gonna just advertise on my social, advertise on my socials, and I'm already starting with a base of 4,000 customers. It's like, nah, that's not exactly how that works. And so, learning that tough conversation, but in the inverse, the good thing about it is, I have people that like love everything that I do. They're sharing stuff, and I've never met these people in my life. And they're just like, Gerard, I want to be a huge supporter. I'm like, I don't even know who you are, but thank you so much for it. But the biggest thing is just knowing that you're not going to have your friends are going to support. They're going to say they support you, and they mean it, but they're not going to become your customers. And so that's not where your focus needs to be. Because if you try to run off the opinions of your friends who will never convert to a customer, then you have a pretty psychotic business or bipolar, because you're going off of people who are giving you opinions who are never going to buy anything to begin with. So
Yeah. I think I was talking about it on a previous episode on this pod, but yeah, that's something that I had to get over myself. But then, just from a strictly logical standpoint, even if all my followers support it, that is for what I would want to do for the business. That's not even a sustainable business model,
right.
you know. So I definitely, to your point, I think we all have to, learn to manage our expectations with that. But it's so true, so true. Is there any additional advice you would give to someone looking to start a business?
Take your time with it. Um, Become legal first. That's always a big thing for me, because I work with the IRS every day. Nothing's worse than a person who starts a business and then doesn't have their paperwork together, and then is not claiming any kind of revenue that they're making from their business. It's like, so how did $40,000 just end up in your account, but you've submitted nothing from a tax perspective? So becoming legal, more than likely you'll need an LLC. And an LLC is going to protect you, so that if somebody were to sue you, they can't come after your personal, like your house. Would just be able to come after the business. And so you definitely want to put yourself in a good position, because not only from a protection perspective, but it also really benefits you on some of the expenses that you have anyway, because it's related to the business. So make sure you do your research, get 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 authenticated with the IRS and your states, and then just make sure that you don't create unrealistic goals. Like, you may have been doing this on the side, and now you want to create a business. That's great, but have realistic goals, and don't spend your proposed revenue. Like, let's say you're a barber, and let's say you finally decide you've been cutting hair in the basement for years, and now I'm gonna go run my shop. Well, you have 20 customers in the basement. That doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have 20 customers that will convert when you move to the shop. So you don't want to get out here and start spending things to a point where it's just like, okay, I just spent $40,000 on getting my business up and running, and I have earned nothing, because I've seen that happen before. People going into debt. That's my biggest thing. Depending on your business, you might have to take out a loan, but if you can, by all means, try to do your business with no debt.
Sure. Last question for you. What is next for you personally and professionally?
So the employer has determined what my next was, at at the job. So that's been determined for me. Um, like I said earlier, my plan is to convert and become a trusted name on the employee side. When I think of finance, or think of money, when you think of people who are out here from the consumer perspective, you think of people who help you with budgeting. You think of people who help you with tax filing, CPAs. There's nobody in my space saying, hey, let me make sure you understand why you're getting paid the way you're getting paid. Let me make sure you understand that this is the type of deduction that can and cannot come out of your check. And so I feel like I have an open lane to really create that education. And so that is my next step, is to move into that space and become the name. I don't need the fame. It's just that I want the education out there, because the more people can get educated, the more they're not knocking on payroll's door saying my check don't look right. Well, you can confirm if your check's right once I start putting information out there to teach you on that.
Got it. I guess this is the last question. But is there any way that you want to close? I just want to give you the floor to promote however you see fit before we get out of here.
Sure. Well, appreciate the time, brother. As always, this is just like normal conversation with us. But as I've mentioned, I'm That Payroll Guy. And so I am on all socials, That Payroll Guy, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Snapchat, anything with a social, just look for That Payroll Guy. My website is thatpayrollguy.com. I do focus on payroll education. From a consultant side, it can be something as simple as, hey, let me book a 30-minute session. Can you explain how my check is done this way? Can you explain why when I filled out the W-4 it calculated the check? Why did I owe taxes this year? Like, did I do something wrong? Something as simple as that. Or you can book me for speaking engagements. I speak at local chapters. I also speak for employers. I've done several already that have educated people on the W-4 and how to fill it out and what happens when you check this box and you don't check this box. And so anything that you need from payroll, I am your trusted payroll source. So come see me at thatpayrollguy.com.
Perfect. Have to do mine right. So I have so many. For the podcast.themonarchbrand.com. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/@themonarchbrand. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. For the product itself, I make hair pomade. For those of you who are not familiar, but it's a unisex hair pomade at themonarchbrand.com. And that's all I got. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate you. So glad we was able to make this happen. I get to see you this weekend, so that's great.
Always. That's always a good thing.
This is the first time since pre-COVID, right?
Yeah, because the last time we got up was like 2 weeks before the world shut down when we did that game night in DC.
Oh, yeah. Well, as an appreciation for you coming on, I will withhold the next time I ask money until June. Let's go June. June sounds good. It's pretty gracious.
Thank you for being so gracious.
Man, I'm a man of the people, dog. What can I say? No, but no. To everyone who is listening, thanks so much for listening. I hope you got something out of this. I know I did. Definitely with his story, I think we all, whether you're trying to be a consultant or a business owner, or whether you just wanted to hear someone who bet on himself and did it logically and was smart with it and went through the motions, I think this was a really good episode for that. So thanks so much for listening, and we out. Peace.